All right, we are here to discuss The Last of Us TV show. Oh my goodness. We had just completed both episode 1 and episode 2. I mean, episode 1 was last week, episode 2 was this week. I think we kind of want to cover both episodes. I think that would be a good idea. But we'll probably
Yes,
just
definitely.
mostly focus on the second one since the second one's kind of the crazy episode that just happened. I'm Doublepulse. I'm here with the real Nathan
Nathan
Drake.
Drake, 88.
Nathan Drake, 88. Oh God. But Last of Us TV show, it's definitely one of the ones that I think a lot of people have been pretty hyped about.
Yeah,
We have basically, from what we watched so far, it replicates the game like quite a bit. You would say so, right?
I agree. Yeah,
It, it,
100%.
it I guess we will. Let's start off with the first, since we
Was
haven't
the story or?
done the first. We haven't done the first episode yet, but
Mhm.
then we'll focus most of this attention going to be into the second. So
Sounds good. Yeah,
I think, I think what really probably caught me off guard the most on the first episode was how much they decided to incorporate Sarah's backstory into it, and how
yes,
they
definitely.
added more stuff into the first episode that I thought was just like, whoa.
They put a lot more build up into what was going to happen in beginning of the game. Pretty much started out where she's in the house and she's just what the heck is going on and stuff like that. And they did have that part, but it took about like maybe 15-20 minutes to get there. So I feel like the surprise was how they incorporated the beginning where they have the interview with the guy, the
Mm-hmm.
scientist and stuff like that. And it kind of like wow, this is interesting to have like kind of like a backstory on like what's going on with the virus and the fungus stuff like that. So by starting like that, I felt like it was kind of interesting how they built up the pacing. Where it kind of started out like a mystery and then started to get
Mm-hmm.
like more a slow build up. But I like how they incorporated Sarah's story because they put more emphasis on why we're gonna care for her before what happens. And
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing with the watch in the game.
Well, there's a reason for the watch too. Like it's not like it was just a watch that was given to Joel at the start.
Yeah,
It was a watch that was actually like already broken, and she went to
exactly.
go and get it fixed. And this whole dynamic of like
And the game
adding
didn't
this.
talk about that, right?
No,
The game
no,
never
not
discussed that.
really.
Yeah,
The game, from my understanding, and I know it's been a while since you've played it, and from my understanding,
yeah.
in the game, she just buys the watch. No, she's just already got the watch, and that scene plays pretty much identical, with the exception you actually get to see her go to the watch shop, get it
Yeah.
fixed. You see all the people panicking on the street.
Sorry, there's one thing I was going to say really quick that I noticed. I don't know if you noticed in the show, but they mentioned when she's in the car that whole thing about people in the city are having this happen to them, and then she mentions, "Is it people that only go more than once or something?" Because I feel like maybe the show was trying to set up that maybe she has been infected, and that's why that soldier shoots at them because maybe he's thinking, "Oh, she was in this." Maybe they're hinting that I don't know, like she was in the city, and the fact that she was injured, maybe they were thinking like, "Oh, she's an injured girl. Maybe that's why we're gonna shoot her." Because I felt like, what was the point of the soldier shooting them in the first place? If there was never any like, you know, there's no reason. It just felt like more they're
I
doing it in an
don't think
evil way, right?
I
Like,
don't think they I don't think the soldiers had any sort of reason to shoot. They're just more ordered to shoot because they're not going to take any chances to like basically be like, "Hey, we want to run some tests, blah 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 blah," cuz which we'll get onto into the second episode, but the one thing I want to
yeah,
cover, which really, you know how you were talking once before, when we were talking about this in private, was the
yeah,
one of the interesting things that they never covered is how did this all start? And even the
exactly.
second episode gets into it, but one of the really subtle things that I didn't pick up until I had to go back and look was that this whole thing started when it came to grains. And if you notice that both
Yeah,
Joel and Sarah, they were not eating anything with bread in it. They had eggs because and bacon. And Joel was
oh,
on a
you're right.
keto
That does
diet.
make sense.
And the grandma, the neighbor next door, they were feeding some sort of pancakes or cookies. And
You are correct. That was
had Sarah had taken the cookies, she would have got infected. Because that was in the second episode, they sort of related back that
but
that
she
it's
takes the
have something
cookies.
to do
She
with.
just doesn't eat them, I guess.
She has not ate the cookies, and the reason she
But
never
she took
ate
them.
them was
She took them,
because
put
of
them in her backpack,
raisins.
I think.
She
Yeah,
never ate
that's
them
true.
though
Yeah,
because they were the raisins relate. Raisins weren't her favorite thing, but I imagine maybe she didn't want to be rude. But
that's true.
that
That's true.
the infection, I believe, came from grains and a lot of things related to that. And everybody
Yeah,
who was eating, and what was really weird is the doctor in the second episode. I don't know what she was eating, but you
yeah,
notice how everyone who got sick, well, granted, you don't know anybody who got sick, but
yeah,
it seemed very specific to certain people getting sick. Like the old lady, the dog started looking at her weird.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, I remember that too. Yeah,
they definitely covered a lot. I like what they did with the soldier.
yeah. Do you think it was a red herring though when they were saying stuff in the car about like I went to the city? Maybe people who didn't know what was gonna happen, they're trying to think like, oh, maybe it's kind of direct that maybe she's infected even though she isn't, because I don't know what was the point of saying like, except for like kind of mislead you that oh I was at the city, because Joel brings up people are sick in the city, and then she goes, is it only people that have been there multiple times, not just once? Because she goes to the city to fix the wash. So I'm wondering if that was the reason to mislead people to think, oh my god, maybe she's infected already, kind of thing.
Maybe
Because
I
that
don't
didn't
think
happen in the
so.
game. I don't know. Anyways, yeah,
No,
it's not. I
no,
don't think it's too important. But isn't it ironic how like it's like eating healthy kills you? It's just a joke I'm saying because it's just as funny with the bread and
that's
stuff.
funny.
Like,
Well, I don't necessarily. I think it was more or less like it was funny. He was. I don't know what exactly in grains or in bread or whatever. What exactly
yeah,
what it was, but it is ironic how like the one thing that he could have nearly got infected, Joel, is because he was on a keto diet. So
yeah.
I think it was keto.
Gotta
He
do this
was
keto
what
diets
paleo
instead.
keto. It was whatever. But I thought it was
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
interesting. But as you get further in the
I
episode,
agree.
you see this guy dealing with drugs, the freaking the
Soldier. Yeah,
soldier, and then the soldier comes back later in the episode, which is really really cool because it's like now you have some sort of attachment to the soldier, even though you don't know who he is and you really don't care about him. But
I
now
agree.
that's
I agree.
connection where you're like thinking, oh well, now that Joel, maybe this guy won't shoot at Joel, but he's like, because he seemed hesitant too, right?
And
The
he wasn't
soldier.
going to until the Ellie thing. I think honestly, I don't think he was going to. But
No.
Joel had that father like
Mm-hmm.
primal like instinct to protect her, and that made him go and rage and kill the
Mm-hmm.
soldier because he saw red. He was just going crazy on him because he thought like he remembered Sarah and was like, oh my god,
Mm-hmm.
and I was reading this thing too.
Yeah.
Or was it a article or video? They're talking about how Ellie had this like sense of I enjoy this, like him protecting me kind of thing, which is
Mm-hmm.
different from Sarah, where she was scared watching Joel kill the grandma that was basically turned infected.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that seeing the dynamic of how it was different and changed and stuff.
Well, what's interesting, well, that is definitely a dynamic that I think will be very much discussed when it comes to later parts on the show because one of the funny things about Ellie in the game is Ellie in the game, even though she is sort of similar in the sense of like the personality. I
Yeah,
don't think she's as activated as into at her age to be like, oh, I'm gonna go out and straight up kill a whole bunch of people. Ellie in the show basically seems like she is more activated by it, and she had more experience for whatever she was grown up in that world of violence, so she's more connected with like,
yeah.
oh shit, this is crazy. But yeah, go on.
I read this. Sorry, I read this thing about what comments of what people were saying about the episode, and they're saying that Ellie, they feel like in the game was more not really sensitive or like calm, but she seemed more like like I want to kill in the show than in the game. The game she like jumped at Joel like stab whatever, but everyone's like she's so stabby or like saying f you, and like that's her personality. But people are thinking I don't know if I agree with it, but people think the show she's just like pretty much too like I'm tough. Then in the game we're kind of like built up, In a way they felt
Mhm.
like they were just she was just too strong in the very beginning than
Mhm.
the game. But I can't remember. Like I said, I haven't played for a long time, so I don't remember how intense she was. But by watching the show, you can see how intense she is in the
Oh
beginning.
yeah. I
Like people
am
say, she's
very
just stabby,
curious.
stabby.
I'm very curious to see how they're going to either team or have that dynamic, go forward, because it seems like it very much seems like that is the subtle difference.
Hmm.
And maybe later in the show, as you get closer and as she's experienced more, she realizes how screwed up things are. Because what
Yeah.
also to be should be clear on is she didn't really, in the show they covered this, but she really was, I don't know, she was an orphan and she was isolated,
Yes.
but
Yes.
she was
I was
also
gonna.
going to school for training, I think, if I
That's
remember
right.
correctly.
Yes, she did say that.
So
Yeah.
it's possible that she has a perception on what she expects and what she's expected to act like, that when she hits that reality of, like, if they run into any sort of bandits, or if, later on the scenes and later in the game when it comes to the middle chapters of Pittsburgh, I'm curious to see
Yeah.
if she's going to be freaked out by that, because she's like, oh shit, this is darker than I really
Well,
thought.
did you did you notice that when Tess in the second episode Ellie sees what's going to happen, right? She knows,
Hmm.
she's Tess is infected basically, and
Hmm.
there's a point where Ellie goes to Joel and says, "We're not leaving her behind." But it seems like
Mhm,
at one point she already knew that she's infected. She has to accept this. But it seems that
mhm,
part of her at that one moment was like, "Oh my god, we can't leave her behind. I can't be stuck with Joel." So I feel like that
right.
part of her, like she cares, she cares, but she also understands what's going on. But there's moments where
Mhm,
she like kind of like snaps out, like realizes, oh my god, this is serious. Like I can't let this
mhm,
happen. So I feel there's that part of her that's basically like
right.
she's tough, but she also like has a soft side.
Well, before we get into the second episode, just to kind of conclude some of the
Yeah,
thoughts that we have on the first, let's talk about some of the things that they've obviously changed in terms of environment in the first episode. And I guess we could also talk about, just in
yeah,
general, the the fact that they're obviously going to skip out on a lot of the gunfighting and crazy. It's just to sort
and
of give an
sneaking
idea,
around.
like,
Yeah,
the pacing of the episode, because it was an hour and 25 minute episode, and you're like,
yeah,
wow, they got this far, but yet it feels like the story and the way it's made for TV is there's more story involved with it and less of that stuff you'd see that
in the
just
gameplay.
stretched out the gameplay. All right. Well, I feel like we get into episode two and talk about that, because that was kind of
Two
more of a
now.
shell
Yeah,
shock. That was something I did not expect a lot. Episode two is clearly called Infected. The episode one was called When You're Lost in the Darkness or something like that. Uh, you know,
yeah, it
I'm
was.
almost betting that I could be wrong, but I'm almost betting that with that saying, they use the first half in the first episode and they're going to use the second half in the last episode. You get what I'm saying? With, like, seek the light or whatever.
Oh, look for the light
Look
at
for
the
the
very end,
light.
kind of like a split. Yeah, because it's the Firefly
Yeah.
saying. Yeah, yeah, I could see that. I could see that
Yeah.
happening.
But on to the
That'd be cool if
second
they did that.
episode. The second episode obviously opens up completely different. You are seeing some sort of scientist. Looks like it's located in Jakarta, 20 years back in 2003.
Yep.
Gives a little bit of more detailed into the backstory on how this thing even began to be an issue, because they never talk about this in the game. What was your thoughts on that whole intro? Because that was fucking crazy.
I thought it was very chilling. I thought just watching it made me feel like, wow, I just went through a pandemic myself, the whole world, and just seeing that feeling of like there's no hope. Like, he's like, what should we do? And she's like, bomb the city, bomb everyone. And after seeing
Hmm.
how she reacted to the patient or the guy, the subject that was just, dead and then the fungus was coming out, that was just terrifying to see. Like it was I felt like it was very creepy. And the way
Yeah.
they set it up where you're like, it's so slow paced, like, like she's like, why am I here? What's going on and stuff like that. And the police guy is like, just like saying like this is what's going on and stuff like that. And the way they kind of built up the suspense was really good. And I felt like it wasn't too long. It was perfectly
No.
paced because it was just like an intro for like 5 minutes, whatever. And then it started the show where Joel is. But I felt like by incorporating that, it was actually a really good thing they did that. I felt like it added way more to how scary this is and the fact that it's already
Hmm.
in the show happened. You already know it's gonna
Yeah.
happen. So I'm like, oh, what can happen? Like, is this gonna happen? You already know. So it's like it's even more scary
Mhm.
knowing that it's happened and you see how it led up to that.
Right. And they even get deeper into it because in the beginning, when this lady is talking about bomb the city, when they're going through the city and they ask about the bombs, there's like, yeah, they pretty much did exactly that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When Joel, you're right. When they mentioned, they said this is what
Hmm.
happened, and Ellie was like, was it really this bad or something like that? And he was saying
Hmm.
like, well, it was better for us or something. A lot more people survived or something like that. But they had to bomb all the cities in the whole world basically, and it was crazy. And the fact that they explain more about I can't say the right thing, the cordyceps, whatever, the whole wiring with infected, how it
Hmm.
changed from spores to actual like wiring in the ground. They actually said was more
Dude.
realistic because it's based on like actual scientific evidence that they'd be more of kind of in nature connected. So like in the show, when Joel actually steps or whoever steps on a piece of that wiring, it actually can trigger a whole event
Yeah.
way far away where the infected are and bring them all to you, which I find is
That
more scary than pores too at the same time because it could be
they
any moment you could just get rushed. You gotta step
bro,
in something.
that's even more scarier than zombies because
Yeah,
zombies, sound and all this. But when you think about like the fact that you could be the cause and you can cause an entire horde that could be miles away to just go rushing
and
to you.
yeah, and raid like a settlement or something like that if you're there. You know what I mean? Like you could
Yeah.
totally just mess something up. But and everyone's clumsy. Someone's gonna step on something. So it's not like you have to be so aware all the time.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of people that you know some people are just clumsy by nature. They can't probably do that. So you never know. So just having
Right.
that as like a factor makes it even more scary and also more
Exactly.
unpredictable. So
Yeah, so in that episode, they clearly they skipped the entire sky tower thing where you're climbing in the rain, and that was replaced by what was the I think it was the museum, right?
well, they had some of the skyscraper, and then they went to the museum after, right?
Yeah.
But they had a conversation, I think, in the skyscraper where it was him, Joel and Ellie, and they had a kind of small like not confrontation, but more of like a discussion and like kind of
Hmm.
sarcasm and stuff about like who they are and stuff like that. And I felt like that, like you said before, privately, that they pretty much used that conversation to cover all the gameplay elements of going through the skyscraper and making it to the museum
Right.
by doing that because I'm sure you can't really show all this stuff leading up with
No.
gameplay, right?
And then
So the way
pretty
they
much
did that was interesting.
pretty much in the game, pretty much Tess took care of everything that happened in the game, and all Joel and Ellie did was just chill back and wait while she opens the door. But
Yep,
I feel like what's interesting with that is it just goes to show that you have to extend certain elements of a particular narrative just to fit in a video game,
hundred
and
percent.
that you're able to take that story and condense it down to a 7-minute scene or however long that scene was,
Yes,
and still tell more story because the show is a whole hour and you can cover so
more.
much more. So
I
it's a
agree.
trip how they're able to add more story with it in a shorter period of
Amount of
time.
time. Yeah, I agree.
But Last of Us, the game, when you really look at that game, the story didn't pick up until like well later in the title.
Oh,
Like,
like probably halfway through it, I honestly felt like the
yeah,
story became more in depth. Where the
mhm,
first half felt like it was more of like a progressional journey to that point.
yeah,
But the one thing I was gonna say that was really interesting is the fact that they covered all the iconic moments and did them so perfect, like just like the game. Maybe slightly different, but still like good enough. Like they didn't skip any important moments. They just
No.
kind of had like the way it led up to that point, maybe slightly different, but they still made sure they were accurate with all the pivotal moments in the story.
Yeah. No.
So far,
Exactly.
as not to say. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting by that is they covered the scene with the ladder in a
Yes.
more I would say in a little bit of less dramatic way. You're not going to show Joel put down
Trying to
the
figure out where to put
ladder
it.
and not know where to put it, or him crafting shivs and stuff
Yeah.
like that. That'd be really funny.
Did
I've
you
seen
find that
people.
funny that the clickers that he didn't kill him with the shiv? I was expecting him to like be like run out bullets and then use the shiv to kill the clickers like in the game, but he
He just
didn't. So
had
I was like
an assault
interesting.
rifle right from the
Yeah,
start. You're just giving him an assault rifle.
if
Okay,
only you
cool.
had that in the game, it'd be so much easier, right? But they couldn't do that, of course.
I don't. I don't think. Well, here's the funny thing. Clickers in the show are, believe it or not, more deadly than they are in the game because you make one little sound
Yeah,
and you
100%.
practically will cause all of them to come towards you. So the show is doing a phenomenal job of like, oh god, these things are actually terrifying. They're not just a set piece.
The
You
updating the
can
ant for it.
you
Yeah.
can just you can't just run or sneak past them and take them out with a makeshift knife. uh but
Hmm.
it's clever to how they transition to that point, because that's the same part for anybody who's played the game, obviously.
Yeah.
That's the same that thing, when they're showing that clicker stuff, as somebody who obviously played the game, you're like, oh, this is where she's gonna get bit, or this is where Tessa's gonna get bit.
Yeah, yeah. And they kind of throw you off a bit.
They do.
What's
But
funny is the contrast from the episode 1 to episode 2. How episode 1 was more very story, a lot of people talking, and episode 2 was more of like a silent kind of like traveling through more suspenseful
mhm,
horror type episode that was less on exposition and dialogue and more on what's happening in the scenes and stuff like that.
right. Get into that. The scene that happened before where she's going in there playing in the piano. I feel like the reason that was put into there was to sort of, because a lot of people are talking about how Ellie, oh, she seems too stabby stab and she seems too cold. But
Yeah.
I think also to remember she's still like what, 14, so they kind of want to show her like that sort of annoying
Yeah.
14-year-old kid who's just curious about everything
Just like how
because
Joel
she's
was like, "You're a weird kid," and she's like, "You're weird, a
yeah,
kid." Back, it's just like what a kid would say, you know. So it
yeah,
reminds you that she's still a kid, like mentality, while
right.
still being like kind of mature in the sense of how she speaks and how she fights and stuff.
And
But
I think
yeah,
and I think the reason why she was very obviously aggressive towards Joel in the first episode was clearly that's part of her trait, but two, because she's with Marlene, and the other being when she's loosening her guard being around Joel and she's playing the piano and she doesn't know how to swim. They even
yeah.
covered that, which I thought was kind of like, okay,
I
we're
feel
going
like
that
that's
route.
because they wanted to show that okay, we're still trying to be like the game. I feel like that was more of like a tie-in, like okay, this
Mhm.
is the same Ellie we know, this is the same Joel we know. We have to show that sooner or later, and I feel like by incorporating in that, it made you a reminder. I don't think it was because it was the timing of how long they've been together. I feel like it
No.
was more of like they wanted to establish that this is who
Right.
they are. We're
No,
they're the same
it
characters
is who
as
they
soon as
are.
possible.
It's
Yeah,
not, but like they've probably. I what I'm saying is, even in general, I think it takes too much for people to loosen up. And I think what's interesting
true.
is Tess, on the other hand, she loosened up a lot more than Joel did. She was
Yes,
almost like, in a weird way, she almost became like sort of this strange motherly figure where it was like all of a sudden it's like, oh, you care for this girl,
but did that
even
happen in
though
the game too? I can't remember. I thought she became
no.
more like that when she got infected. She never changed like that.
No,
Okay.
she did a little bit, but it was very little. It was more or less that, cuz like in the game, Tess was straight up going to kill her. She's like, "Yo, you're infected. Quit bullshitting. Everybody changes within 3 hours." In the
That
show,
is right. That
in
is
the
right.
show, she's more like, "Oh my god, look. and then all of a sudden Joel is, on the other hand, the
Joel's the
more
opposite for her. That from the game, she's basically the one that's more like concerned about killing her than Tess was, which is interesting how they
Mhm.
changed that whole thing.
Right. But I mean, I think Joel. I think even in the beginning of the game, Joel was still very hesitant. Like he didn't care too much about her
Yeah,
at first either. But as that relationship builds up, so they covered the piano, and then after that, they went into the museum-looking places where they discovered the clickers, which was a huge trip because anybody who'd played the game knows that you're expecting mercenaries and you're not expecting clickers. So that's a change in
or
pace.
the infected and all that stuff. Yeah,
It killed all the mercenaries that were down there. Um,
yeah. That
uh,
brings you to the point that the last scene in the end of episode 2, when they are attacked, usually in the game they're attacked by mercenaries, but they brought in the infected instead
mhm,
at the end. And I felt like the reason why they did that was because the whole episode was about infected. I feel like the change of contrast of making it so the mercenaries showed up would have lessened that intense feel of like feeling
mhm,
isolated. Because when with humans,
right.
you feel like more like, okay, I feel like more alive or feeling like more safe. But when you see like you're infected the whole time, and then a bunch of infected come, it just sets that level from 1 to 100 when tons are rushing at you, you know? So I felt like the fact that they did that instead was interesting, and I feel like it's kind of better in a way, especially how
Mhm,
Tess's last scene, she didn't just you don't in the game you see her like I think off camera or something that something happens and she's fighting off and she dies. Well, in this you see her to the point where the infected come and pretty much walk up to her, one of them, and go for like a kiss of death, and this fungus
oh my
comes out, and it's
god. Ew.
creepy. And the fact that I think she let that even happen was because she was so petrified. You could see how scared she was. Like she knew she was gonna die, but at the same time she was just like I need this lighter to work, to sort of blow it up. But I don't think she could move. I think she couldn't like
No.
get away from the infected because she was just like intensely like what's happening.
No, that lighter was not working until the very
Yeah,
last second. It was what's weird though. So to rewind back a little bit though, because after she obviously had got bit, what was a trip was her body language completely
yeah,
changed. Now, here's an interesting question though.
yes,
She clearly knew something was wrong and she tried hiding it from Joel, but she talked about how, she sprained her ankle. What I'm curious is, say hypothetical, if we weren't if we didn't play the game,
I didn't know.
I
Yeah,
and didn't know, I feel like the body language is almost too obvious in a
her
sense.
acting was very, very like it's good. I don't think it's bad acting, but I felt like it was intentional to show that okay, something's changed. Like something happened to her.
Mhm.
Something's off because you could tell that. And I think it wasn't because of making it like bad acting or
No, I don't think it
intentional. I
was.
felt like it was more the fact that it's like how someone would be like once they realize something happened. Naturally, you'd be more like different, like hesitant and stuff like that. You'd feel like you'd be easy to read. That's how people would
Mhm.
be like. If you knew something was wrong with you and you're hiding something, you couldn't like act and pull it off, especially if you know yourself you're gonna die. That's kind of like you can't really
Mhm.
be 100%
No.
anything else but what you're dealing with. You can't be yourself, whatever like that. So I feel like that was really interesting. And I also think with Ellie, I don't know if this happened in the game, but she got bit twice. And I don't know if that was
Yeah.
another thing that Joel had to
No.
because she told Tess is like telling Joel, look, she just got bit again. And he's like saying like, it could still happen or whatever like that. But basically Tess is trying to get in his head like, okay, I think at that point she knows this is hope. This is where I think things are going to happen.
Mhm.
I witnessed her get bit and she's still okay. And that's what I think triggered that sense in Tess that she's going to be like, okay, or kind of like the sense of like acceptance because she realized that this is for a good cause.
Well,
I'm going to die, but this is for a good cause. And Joel needs to find this out. And Joel has to bring her there because if she doesn't, I'm dying for nothing kind of
Well,
thing.
there was two type of there was really two types of emotions I got from her. Like, one, she's accepting, but bro, I sense she's angry. Like
Yeah.
she when she's like bringing when she brings Ellie in there and like pushes her in there, she's like, all right, this is gone too much. Like, she's angry, but she's also like, oh, I am obviously I'm gonna die. I don't want this to be for nothing, but this is
Yeah.
like it. infuriates her because it's like
She didn't
in
want
a
to do this in the first place.
no, she didn't. And she's like, I risked my life. Basically, she risked her life for it, and then all of a sudden, because of what we know, it's gonna make things even more intense later
Oh,
on.
I know, yeah, what happens? Yeah, for sure.
But I think for the most part, like that episode pretty much covered what I expected it to cover. Like I kind of expected the episode to end right around the time that
It was a
Tess.
perfect way to end the episode for
It
sure.
is.
Very, very good thing. And yeah, I just felt like they did a phenomenal job with that
Mhm.
episode. And also, I don't know if you noticed, but they said that Neil Druckmann actually directed that episode. I think Craig Mason directed the first one, so I think they're
Mhm.
working like neck and neck together, whatever, to get the same like vision. But I feel like Neil Druckmann, like Craig Mason was saying, knows more about like his world, his lore, like all the what it's all about. He said Neil knows how to make you feel fear, basically. So I feel like by putting him in that episode or directing the episode made it seem like okay, this is the Last of Us we really know. So what I wonder is in the future, are they going to have him doing certain episodes that are focused on like intense fear that you'd have to like match the game so well with? You know what I mean? Like Craig Mason like knows it, but he doesn't like he's not like the creator. So what I'm saying is like imagine the scene where it's like when they're in winter. I don't want to say what happens, but there's a point where it gets really like intense and fearful. And I'm wondering if they're gonna have Neil Druckmann actually direct those episodes, or if he's just gonna do like smaller, low key things that are just not as important
Mhm.
as the main things in the story.
Well, I guess sometime it would be. I guess we would soon find out. But yes,
Yeah,
episode two pretty much completed on a bang. I think it's just as good, and I really can not wait to see what happens for episode three, which seems to be
extremely. Yeah,
getting into the whole thing with Billstown and just in general. Just I'm very curious to see how they're going to expand Bill's story because
mm-hmm.
they're adding characters that were clearly not in the game, and they're adding elements to where like even though they knew each other in the game, Bill and Joel, I think their relationship was going to be very different in the show.
I agree. I agree.
Like their relationship in the game is almost like, oh great, I gotta go to Bill. Bill is this guy that's like
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
hard headed, stubborn, and I think we're gonna see a little bit of that, but it's not gonna be as hard headed Bill, but more or less like oh Joel is they're gonna be more elements to it, which I'm curious to see. And
I
so,
totally agree. And also with Bill's backstory, with I don't want to say what, but you know what I'm talking about within the
mhm,
personal storyline of
yeah,
his.
yeah, I'd
Um,
be curious to see how that plays out.
Before we close this, I just wanted to mention really quick about something very quickly about the settings of Last of Us, how they nailed the
Hmm.
architecture, the feel, the color grading. Everything felt like you're watching the game. I feel like as an aesthetic point, they really nailed the feel of Last of Us, the look of Last of Us, besides the acting and the story. I feel like they did a really good job at like making it basically overall feel like you're playing the game for the first time, but in like a film form watching it.
Yeah. I'd be curious to say. But I think for the most part, I think we covered quite a bit. I mean, this video is definitely going to go a lot longer than I
Yeah,
expected. But if
yeah,
anybody who's
unfortunately, yeah.
interested in hearing more, we'll probably cover more episodes in the future. So feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And I will talk to you guys later. Goodbye.
Thank you. This is Real Nathan
Bye.
Drake 88 signing out. Oh no.